Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. If you know me and you've attended my shows, you know I always start off with the same greeting because even still in this day and age, I do think it's so super cool that no matter where you are in the world or what time zone you are in, together we can all come here at one time and at one place to have great conversations. So welcome to the second season of the Sellovatorz Live. I'm super excited to be here. I am also very appreciative of those that are out there watching and having Steve McCullough here as my guest. We'll learn a little bit about him in just a brief moment, but I want to make sure that you guys know that as part of the conversation, I'd love for you to engage with us by either dropping a comment, a thought, a comment, be that a thought or a question, so that we can include you as part of this conversation today. And I'm super excited because Steve and I, let me share a little bit how we met. He and I have a common friend, Chris Colt. So if you don't know Chris, make sure you go follow him, Chris Colt. He helps, he's amazing at sales first and foremost. Second, he does some amazing challenges. So be sure that you go check him out and learn a little bit about him. But nonetheless, it's not about Chris, right? But he actually is our common bond. And while I didn't know Steve, I knew Chris had talked about Steve often because I was also part of Chris's community. And all of a sudden, for the first time, I had an opportunity to meet him on one of Chris's annual Christmas parties. And we were able to engage there and then took it offline and had our own Zoom. And I just fell in love with Steve. We share a lot of common methodologies or practices as it relates to sales. And anyone who knows me knows that it is all about humanizing sales for me. Yes, leverage AI, do it in a way that augments and not replaces, but then let's focus on really elevating what we do from a human perspective, really fostering a human experience that the buyers of today demand. And that could be a whole discussion in itself. That's not what we're here to talk about necessarily today. But so I'm super excited to have Steve here. I would not do him justice by introducing him, so I'll allow him to do his own introduction. But before we do that, Steve, I'd like to know where everyone is tuning in from. So in the comments below, make sure that you let us know where you are listening from. I'm here in Houston. Steve, where are you located?
I'm in Dayton, Ohio.
Whoo, that is cold.
It's not as cold as it was a couple weeks ago. We were below zero a couple weeks ago. So we're glad to have a bit of a respite.
Yeah, I'm glad that you have a rest too. We had 19 degrees about the time that you guys hit below zero, and that was really cold for us in Houston. So today we have like 80-degree weather, and Steve was sharing that the snow just melted yesterday there. So, right. All right. But be sure, let us know where you're located so we can recognize you here on the live stream. Steve, I'm going to pass it on over to you so that you can do your own introduction and share a little bit about what you're doing, who you are, a little bit of your history, and then we'll dive right into conversation.
Sure. Thank you, Denise. It's wonderful to be here and be with your audience. Like you said, meeting you through Chris has been a real blessing to me, and it's just amazing how much we think a lot alike. We have the same experiences in B2B selling, and so I think this is going to be a great conversation. So my name's Steve McCullough. I'm the president and founder of the McCullough Group, and we work with small to medium-sized B2B companies who are looking to elevate their sales and revenue to the next level. We do that through advisory services, coaching, and fractional leadership engagements. And what we find a lot of times, the clients we work with are either seeing revenue decline or level out after growing, or maybe even just the growth curve itself is flattening a bit. And they're concerned about that and not sure exactly what to do about it. And one of the things I love about you, Denise, is that you're focused on AI, and we all know that AI is a great disruptor, and so the world is changing right now in sales, and I think we do have to bring the human to the front of what we do, and so that's what I work with. That's who I work with and how I support them.
Awesome. Thank you. Now, before we really start our discussion. I want to recognize some people who are with us today. So Michelle is out there. Thank you for joining. We've got Raquel, and actually she is dialing in or here in Houston as well. So I'm super excited to have her here. We've got Anna, although it does say LinkedIn user. I know that's Anna from Ireland. We also have Sia here. She's in Dallas in the house. So I appreciate everyone being out there, and continue sharing with us where you're located. Just as an FYI, we did mention Chris Colt. Here's his profile. You can find it in the comments below, so you can click on him and get to know him. So super excited to and here is Steve's profile as well. So we will talk about where to find him, because he's got some great things coming up. But nonetheless, his profile is down in the comments below, so be sure to connect with him. And Raquel was saying it was cold. We were talking about the weather. So, all right. Well, one of the things when we talk about humanizing sales, and when we talk about, you help organizations or salespeople really truly, when they've got problems with their sales quota. Oh, there's Chris. Look at that. Hey, Chris. Good to see you. When about what you do, it's really, I think the key to all of the success when we're working with sales and sales teams is really about mind space. Don't you agree, Steve? What do you around this? Because, by the way, I will say before I pass it on over to you, 90% of sales is based on our mind space, right? Your thoughts on that, Steve?
I think it might be higher. I love that. One of my favorite quotes of all time is from Yogi Berra, the famous New York Yankees catcher, who said about hitting, which he was very good at. He said hitting is 90% mental, and the other half is physical. Now, if you're like me and you do the math, that's 140%. I don't know how he came up with that. But the point of it is that hitting, which is a very physical thing, is 90% mental. And in my experience, sales is, it's higher than 90%, because we're stepping into environments where we don't know what's going to happen, and our own personal sense of worth and well-being and all of that is on the line. We also, as salespeople, we often risk a very high percentage of our personal livelihood. And we have families to support and people counting on us. And so those interactions are really, really important. And so from my perspective, it's at least 90%, Denise. It could be higher, because if you start with the wrong mindset, you're going to have a heck of a hill to climb in terms of being successful in this profession.
I agree. Well, so let's talk about that for a brief moment. So what does having a positive or a sales positive mind space look like to you?
Well, the first thing I think we need to do, and I think that you and I and others in this industry work in this area, is we have to bring some respectability to the sales profession. One of the things that I work with my clients on from a coaching perspective is this idea that selling is actually a very noble thing to do. My quote is, selling is a noble pursuit. And the reason that it's noble is because when we're successful, we actually bring highly valued solutions to our customers' world and make their world better. The other thing is, in doing so, we can oftentimes help them think through their problem, help them think through how they might solve the problem, and help them prioritize what are the outcomes that they might want to accomplish. So the phrase that gets thrown around a lot is trusted advisor, but it's incredibly important, not only to build trust, but to advise. And in doing so, we do something that's really, really important. And I think that oftentimes the sales industry, unfortunately, is maligned by people who don't look at things that way, that they're really, really focused on their own particular outcome, not on their client's outcome. And I think when we put the horse in front of the cart and really focus on the buyer, this is a great profession to be in. It's very personally rewarding, and it really makes a difference in the world. So I think that's the first mindset that I would call out, is that we have to approach this from a perspective of we're doing good in the world, and we're making a difference, and that gives you purpose and meaning in what you're doing, not just hitting quotas.
Yeah, so I actually think that it is more about, instead of trying to sell them something, our mind space should be, how can I help them solve their problem? Because when we approach it in a way that we're helping solve a problem, we're usually uncovering what that problem is. We're taking the time to do that. And then when we do that, we're also helping to build the solution. When we journey with them, when we work together, when we walk the journey together, it is far more successful, with a higher success rate as it relates to closure when we do that, rather than if we just kind of try to pull them along, or we're fighting with one another to figure out who has the upper hand, right? So I think I agree with you. And one of the things that I've been working on, my vision is to at least play my part, my role in helping to elevate sales so that it is a noble profession again. Because while I love that you said it is noble, the way that many people sell today, I think it has devalued sales as a profession, which has really disheartened I've spent over 30 years in sales. To know that that people think of my profession as sleazy, as something other than noble, to me is disheartening, right? And it really makes me sad.
Well, and it damages things for all the rest of us. And so, yeah, we need to carry that message forward. You talk about being, in lockstep with the buyer. We all know that the reality has changed, that buyers have far more options than ever before. A bewildering number of options of how they solve their business problems. Number two, they have more information. They have more information that they could ever read, digest, and kind of internalize and understand. And so what's really interesting is, in some ways, being a buyer used to be a lot easier 20 years ago, because you did not have. I remember when I moved to Ohio, we were living in Dallas at the time, and I was leading a global accounts program for a large organization. And my wife and I liked Dallas. We love Texas. We love our Texas friends, but we wanted to get back east. And that's
By the way, we have some Dallas people out there. See ya.
I know we do, and I loved it there. I lived in Frisco for 4.5 years. We wanted to get back east and closer to family, but what that did for us is it basically divided the country in half. And with my job, I could live anywhere as long as I was close to an airport. That made the whole decision bewildering and surprisingly difficult, more difficult than saying, are we going to move to Dayton, Columbus, or Cincinnati? And so I think buyers have that challenge, and the sellers who can not manipulate them, but guide them through the decision process and help them think through their problem. They not only build trust, they build credibility, but they also are probably one of the only, if not the only person helping that buyer think through their decision process. And to me, whether they buy from you or not, if you can help them think through their problem, you've been of service. And of course, we all want to close the sale. But if we take that attitude of, I'm going to help this person think through their problem, it makes an unbelievable difference, not only in the way you feel about yourself, but the results you're able to deliver for your clients.
Well, and Steve, I could unpack a lot, so we could go down a few different tracks here. But one of the things that really resonates that I want to address, maybe more important than any of the others, at least to me, is this concept of helping them solve to a problem. I always say this: a lot of times when we have conversation, we tend to just ask surface level questions and get surface level responses, or surface level, not service, surface level questions and surface level responses. Usually the buyer knows that they're trying to sell. The buyer, they know they're trying to solve to a problem, They think that it's this particular problem, but it's not until you engage with them in conversation that a lot of times when you ask second and third and fourth line questions, you actually get them to this aha moment, and they realize that the problem that they're trying to solve is a systemic one, that there's really a probable root cause that they should be solving to. And when you help them do that, you've one, established credibility, and two, you've helped get to solve to a problem that usually will result in a higher closure rate and higher dollar value, because it is so much more costly if they don't solve to it. The systemic one is usually not as costly, and if they don't solve to it, it's a maybe what if, because there's probably so many systemic problems. It's the probable root cause that if you can get down to, man, it is a game changer. And then you become that consultant, or that I forget what terminology you use, but you
trusted
then are,
advisor. Yeah,
trusted advisor. Yes. Then you become that trusted advisor, because they'll think, wow, she really helped me get there. I didn't even realize that that was the bigger problem.
I had an example of that a few years ago. I was working with the CEO of a company who wanted to help elevate. He had a technical group of individuals who were also consultative sellers. So they were really kind of learning and getting embedded into sales technique and sales process. But in doing discovery, his name is Phil Ratterman. In working with Phil, one of the things I like to do is I like to read back. Here's what I heard the problem is.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I heard you say you're trying to accomplish. And I believe that there's the problem and then there's the vision, right? There's like two sides of the same coin. It's easiest to talk about the problem sometimes, but it's really the vision that pulls you through, right? This vision of a better world. And I was sitting down with Phil, and I used PowerPoint at the time, and I put up on the screen, I said, now, Phil, here's what I heard you say about your vision for what we might do together. And he paused and he looked at that and he thought, and I'm like, I'm having an oh shit moment. I'm like, okay. He goes, no, I don't think that's it. And I'm like, oh no, I'm kind of freaking out in my mind, trying to stay positive. But I'm like, did I not hear him right? And he goes, that's what you told me. But seeing it here on black and white, I think my vision is actually bigger than that. And he went on to tell me what his vision meant for the strategy of his company and the intention of what they needed to do and what we really needed to focus on from a sales coaching perspective. And it was so instructive because he had given me his vision, but it was clear he hadn't thought all the way through it. And as going through the process, he got more clear about where he wanted to skate to, where he thought the hockey puck needed to be and how they needed to get to that. And it was in the moment, it was kind of a stressful situation, but it turned out to be really, really positive for him and for me. And we did a fantastic job moving the needle towards that. But it's that kind of assistance in helping somebody think through not just the problem, but what does success look like, is incredibly valuable.
Well, and I always say assuming can be dangerous, but as we relate that, however, I think that the opposite of that holds true when you're having a sales conversation, which is sometimes assuming is good, because at least if you're at that point where you're engaging in good conversation, that assumptive statement will allow them the opportunity to prove you wrong. So I will say that assuming is overall dangerous. We should never make assumptions. However, in a sales call, it's opposite of that. Sometimes assuming is a great way to get your prospect to actually dive a bit deeper even. And it really helps you understand. And I'm very much like you. I like to echo back what I think I've heard. But I love this. Sia, and by the way, thank you to everyone who has been engaging. We've got Sincera, we've got Sia, we've got, a ton of people. We've got Raquel out there and Anna. Everyone's having an amazing conversation, and they are calling the traveling sales lady, of whom I love her content as well. So love to have her on the show in the future, and hopefully she's paying attention and watching. So love all that she's got. But as Sia said, how about just being human? This is, after all, an exercise in human connection and relationships. And I think, one of the things I wanted to point out is when we try to get to this real problem, right? This probable root cause. We're having to ask a lot of questions. We're having to make assumptive statements that allow the buyer to contradict that, right? And allow them to, foster additional conversation, right? And I think that when we do that, that shows our human side, because when we're asking those questions, our buyer knows that we really care about them and their problem. That fosters a faster human connection than if you just went through the normal, here are my discovery questions that I need to get answered, taking surface level responses and solving to surface level problems. It takes you a lot longer to establish a relationship than if at the very onset you ask those second and third and fourth line questions, sharing with or showing them that you actually care about them and their problem. Would you agree with that, Steve?
I completely agree. And the word that popping up in my mind as I hear you talk about that is the word authentic. Too often in sales training and sales coaching, what I see is a tactical approach that says, say it this way, do it this way, write it out, script it. And while there's value in sharpening the saw in how you think through the sales process, there's no question. But there's a real danger in overcooking that and not being yourself. We are all unique and we are all different. And what I have found is that when you bring your authentic self to the engagement, when you know what the intention is, you and I were talking about intention before we jumped on this together, right? When you know what your intention for that meeting is, and then you bring your own personal style, approach, humanness, and show that you legitimately care, that's when everything shifts and changes. And I find that a lot of times I'm coaching sales reps on, don't worry too much about the script. We do need to know what the field, the end zone looks like, and we need to know where it is and what we need to drive towards. We do need to have some intention to keep the opportunity moving forward, but we shouldn't get married to a particular tactic. We should bring our own humanness to each and every one of those engagements. And that's, to me, that's the real magic. And so, you would do it not 100%, you would do it very different than I would. And you know what? That's great. That's wonderful. We should all have our own humanity engaged from an authentic perspective, I think.
I agree. I mean, Cella stated scripts worked in 1999, right? I would even say that scripts worked probably in 15, 16, 17, right? It wasn't, I always say it was really when the pandemic hit, when we were forced to really enter, we'd already been going through a digital transformation where we were really starting to leverage the digital platforms more and more. But once the pandemic hit, it caused us to have to be sequestered to our homes and isolated. We started to adopt much more of that digital transformation. So it very, very much accelerated at a really fast pace. But because of that, and with all the AI technologies being introduced, we as individuals, not even just as buyers, but as individuals, we crave that human connection, right? It's not just about jumping on a networking call. It's about understanding the person that you're talking to on the other end, right? And they want to know that you care about them. That's what differentiates us from the machines or from the salespeople who don't know how to engage in a personable way, right? Building that credibility and showing that human connection.
Yeah.
Like Nikki's, we are all different. It's our vulnerability, as you said, our authenticity, our transparency. That's what enables us to differentiate ourselves from other sales reps.
Yeah. Some of us are very lighthearted. Some of us are very serious. Some of us are very structured. I do A, then I do B, then I do C, then I do D. Some of us are just, show up, and have this knack of being able to manage the situation by the seat of their pants. I don't like to fight against any of those natural tendencies. I think it's a real mistake because when, I had this, sales rep in my career who was hired on the same day I was as her manager. And she might even be on here. I don't know. I don't think she is, but she she loves to talk. The lady is just one of these people who just goes on and on and on and on. And she's, but what I didn't understand, so I saw that first and I thought, oh no, this is not somebody I ever would have hired, right? And they hired her for me. And I was kind of pissed off about that as a leader, you know? And and then what I found as I started engaging with her, first of all, I always booked a meeting after my meeting with Holly because I had to have an out, because a 30-minute call could go to 3 hours. I kid you not. And but what I found is that she was incredibly endearing, and she turned out being one of my top salespeople. Had amazing relationships with her customers. They told her everything, and she was just this caring, endearing person who liked to talk. And so you would think, well, that's really a problem, but in her case, it was a strength. It was amazing. So yeah, I think we have to bring our own selves to the role and not be shy about that, especially today. To your point, we live in this mechanized world where every message is optimized by AI, and we do A/B testing to find out which verb should I use, and it does remove us from the human connection quite a bit. And so I think that I would just say to anybody who's listening, embrace your individuality and bring it forward, and don't be shy about doing that. You'll be more successful than you think you would.
Well, and I think that's a lifelong, or not a lifelong, it is a journey though, to really, for a lot of people, they show up, and I did for years, right? I would show up the way I thought everyone wanted me to, right? And it took me a long time. I mean, really, until I started my journey of healing, which is not what we're here to talk about. But I share that with you to say that it's not always easy to get there. And it is sometimes a journey in order to really get to a point where you can be your vulnerable, transparent, authentic self, right? And vulnerability doesn't mean telling the world everything or sharing every deep, dark secret. The vulnerability is just allowing yourself to be okay with making mistakes.
Right.
And because you want to allow others to be vulnerable with you, you want to see the real person in front of you. Yeah. In order to do that, you've got to be able to show that person your authentic self. So that's going to be a little bit harder. One of the things I love to do here on this show is to make sure that everyone walks away with at least a practical tip, something they can do. I think that's a bit of a harder, I don't think that's an easy one to leave people with. But I do think it is super important to be sure that you are work to get to that personal, that place in your soul where you can feel comfortable with being transparent and vulnerable and authentic, right? Whatever authentic looks like to you, right? We all define that differently. Mm-hmm. So that being said, I would challenge everyone to start working towards that, right? People want to see the real you anyway, with all of your mistakes. And, today I got sunburnt over the weekend, which, we talked about the weather, and, I'm showing up with darker skin on my face than on my neck and chest, right? But that's who I am today, right? Well, I did try to cover.
Another thing is, and this, I'm going to state my personal preference, and then I think we do need to probably go to something more practical for folks.
Yeah.
You and I both have our own home office in the background, and not everybody has a place where they feel comfortable doing that. I completely get that, but if you have a dedicated spot for Zoom meetings, and you keep it neat and clean, and it's not got crap everywhere, I say get rid of the background filter. Because it really makes a difference in authentic connection. I've got a New Orleans Jazz Fest poster on my background. It's a great event. I love New Orleans. I love jazz. That's who I am. That's my interest. You may hate that stuff, and that's fine, but you know me a little bit more by my environment. So I just wanted to make that point, that as we do more digital interactions, I think we need to bring more authenticity to that.
I do think that's a great tip, because someone once told me they wanted me to blur my background. And I thought, no, because then you can see, and it's actually a
Right.
great
Yeah,
conversation
I'm trying to
starter.
read what books you read. I can't quite make them
Oh, I
out.
have an array of books. I have an array. But I do think, that one of the things I would challenge everyone with today is to even look at your backdrop, right? That's not as deep rooted as trying to get to a place of authenticity, but at least they get to see, doing something, even just a shift like that will help others see who you are from a personality perspective, or at least get a little bit of a glimpse into that. But let's talk about, I want to go back to intention, right? Because I do think intention, and maybe this is a great way to end on a practical tip that they can walk away with today, because I do think that that's one of the areas that most people tend to fail in, is setting an intention. I know you called it an objective. It's an intention and an objective. It doesn't really matter what you call it, but before you go into a meeting, it's knowing what you want to get accomplished by the end of that meeting, right? Not only what your goal or your intention is, but then all the things that take place in between that to get there, but also having in mind what your next steps might be. And I know you and I had a great conversation about this before we started this session. So give me a little bit of what your thoughts were, Steve.
Well, my number one here, I'm gonna go tactical. Okay, my number one pet peeve phrase is at the end of the meeting for the salesperson to say, "Now, Ms. Buyer, what do you think our next step here ought to be?" And the reason that that drives me crazy is we as sellers know more about the buying process than the buyers do for our particular solution. We do it all day, every day. They may do it once in their life or once every 5 years. We understand what the next step ought to be. And so, number one, I believe you should sit down before every meeting and define 2 or 3 or 4 potential next steps. Like I was sharing with you, I like to use a baseball analogy: single, double, triple, home run. So, what would be a single? What would be a double? What would be a triple? And what would be knocking it out of the park? This meeting went better than I thought it would. And we're going to a fantastic next step. Define those before you get in the meeting. And then the second most important thing is leave time in your meeting to have that discussion, gain agreement, and grab your calendar and put it on the calendar. The most important, the most detrimental thing I see is when the air leaks out of the balloon and you just lose momentum after a really good conversation. And so you need to be very intentional. If it's an hour-long meeting, you can't talk for an hour. You have to talk for 45 minutes and then take 15 minutes and say, even if you're in a great part of the conversation, you need to stop it, because you need to set that next conversation, that next objective, and you need to know what that is going forward, and you need to give yourself time to get in agreement with the buyer on what that is.
Yeah, so she's out here, Nikki Estes. She and I partner in a lot of different areas, and she has seen me do just that in sales calls, right? Which is making sure that you're looking at the time, and that you that you notice where we are in the conversation, and hey, look, we've got little time left. Here's how much time we have left. I really want to make sure that we discover what the next step might be. My thought is based on this, that I'd like to get a next call scheduled. And we actually schedule the next call while we're on that call, with an intention for that, what that next call will look like in general, right? May not be specific, but at least in general, what that will look like. And I tell you, when you take steps like setting intentions, when you ask questions, and I'm starting to summarize kind of what we've been talking about, because I want to be respectful of everyone's time today. When you start really walking, first off, when you put yourself in a mind space that is one that which is a success mind space, right? And however you want to get there to that success mind space, you set your intention for the meeting. You go in and you really look to solve to their problem, be their trusted advisor, right? Be their consultant. And you ask the second and third and fourth line questions and get them to probable root cause. And you start solving to that rather than the systemic problem. And you engage in a way that allows you to navigate the conversation and making sure that you have next steps, right? That you know in your mind what you want to get out of that meeting, not just the intention, but what the potential next step is. And that you ask those probing questions that get them to really even start thinking on their own and take them to aha moments. You will see a much higher success rate. I mean, in working with some of Nikki's clients, I mean, our success closure rate is, I mean, at least 95% because of the way we navigate those calls. And so I do think that you know, injecting, and all of this is about injecting the human in the sales process, right? Differentiating ourselves from the machine. And look, being okay with things like when you can't say the word differentiate, right?
Right, exactly. You're modeling for us, Denise. You're modeling authenticity.
Like my snorting earlier when you were talking about Holly. I think that was who your rep was, right? Yeah. So, you know, I think these are all key, important takeaways from this session. I think one of the practical tips that I think is super key, that I think based on this, is really setting your intention before. Steve, what do you think is a great practical tip?
I'm going to stay in that lane, which is time your meetings and give yourself ample time to schedule that next intention, that next outcome that you've set. To me, that's one of the biggest things I see people struggle with, is they run out of time and then they find out at the end of the meeting that the buyer has a hard stop, and it's like, okay, I'll call you next week. And we all know that next week turns into the week after, and then the week after, and then the week after. And, you know, the whole enthusiasm that you built in that really good exchange, because you were asking good questions, tends to evaporate over time. So I think that's really important.
Awesome. And I want to, before we start to close, I do want to recognize that I've done a really poor job. This is my first live back in a very long time, where I've been navigating the comments and having amazing conversations. So I appreciate everyone bearing with us, as it's taken me a bit of time to recognize some of these comments out here. But I want to say thank you to everyone who has been engaging in conversation with us. Steve, as we start to really close out the session, I know you've got some exciting things happening and coming up here soon. Maybe share a little bit about that and where people can find you.
Yeah. So what's coming up, and we're going to be actually making the official announcement very soon, is I'm going to be doing the Buyer Aligned Selling Challenge starting on March 11th. It's a 4-day workshop on some of these principles that we've been talking about here, and going to be going a bit deeper. So it's 4 1-hour sessions, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, beginning on March 11th. You can find all about me on LinkedIn on my profile, which you shared, Denise. You can also find me on McCulloughGroup.net, which is my website. But I'll be getting those announcements out here very soon, and it's going to be a nominal fee, $185 to join the challenge, and we're going to have a lot of fun digging deeper into some of these principles that are more important than ever in this very mechanized sales process that we've found ourselves in.
Yes, and I did post it, and actually it wasn't me. Chenny is out there in the audience, and she's doing amazing. So I appreciate all your efforts there. Yes, thank you. So I think Steve, it would be great that when you actually announce it and you've got a link, maybe putting it back here in the comments. I know it won't be today. It may take us several days, which also means, we are so happy to have had everyone here live. If you're watching on Team Replay, be sure to leave a comment, #Team Replay, so that we know to come back and engage in conversation with you. All of those who have engaged with us, we'll make sure we come back and engage back in the comments themselves. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Steve, for having been here. I am so super excited to have launched today, even with its quirks, season 2. Look for many more episodes coming up. I'm a little behind in getting my stuff together, so thankfully I've got Chenny and her team here to help me. So stay tuned for next week's episode. We're here Tuesdays at 9 a.m. Central Time. I want to again thank everyone from the bottom of my heart. And Steve, I appreciate you being here. I've had some great fun today. We've had good conversation, and I think we've left people, or I hope we've left people with some great practical tips that they can start. But if I were to leave one parting thought, it would be this: go back to being your authentic self. And if you don't know how to do that, I would start that journey to get to that point where you can be your authentic self with all of your crazy quirks, snorting and all. I want to wish you guys a wonderful rest of your day. See you back here next Tuesday. Thank you to everyone. And I will talk to you guys later. I'm going to take us out with some music. And no, I did not actually implement or add my own music like I wanted to last season, but I'm going to put some on anyway. And we will see you back here next week. Talk to you later, guys.